Gators Breakdown? Join Gators Breakdown Plus. Starting at $3 a month, get access to unique episodes, plus a blog, chat room, giveaways, shout-outs, and more. Gators Breakdown Plus is furthering the interaction with fans and listeners like you. Head to GatorsBreakdown.supportingcast.fm to join Gators Breakdown Plus today. Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters, and you can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Joining me this week is co-host Will Miles. You can find him on his busy site, Read and Reaction, busy YouTube channel going on there for Read and Reaction. We'll get into that a little bit too. Of course, you guys noticed too in the last week, busy Gators Breakdown YouTube channel too. So, Will, man, we're bringing the video content to the Gator fans out there.
Yeah, man, I've brought on some new people to Read and Reaction to help out, and those guys are much better on the video side than I am. So, yeah, that's one of the things that we're planning on doing both over the summer, but then once the fall starts, really breaking things down there on the site verbally written down. That'll be my role, and then the video will be Nick and then Robert Parker. We brought on a new guy, Robert Parker. He's going to be helping out as well.
Sounds good. A lot of stuff out there, and look, it's June, and one of my favorite episodes we got coming up this episode here. Preseason magazines are out. They've been out a couple weeks, so still waiting on that Lindy's SEC magazine to hit the shelves, and it hit this past week. So got that one, and Will, it's just kind of, this is when you can taste it. You can smell football just around the corner.
Yeah, and it's a real football season this year. We're not questioning whether we're actually going to have a season. We're not switching from a normal season to a 10-game SEC schedule. We're not mocking.
Yeah, we're not wondering these preseason magazines are rendered useless now because of a COVID season.
We're not mocking the Big Ten for playing like 5 games and still thinking they deserve a shot at the national title. So, it's a new year. I mean, obviously, hope springs eternal in college football, especially for the big boys. And Florida's one of the big boys, which is what makes it exciting, right? We know we got Alabama coming up pretty quick, and then you got the normal LSU, Georgia, and sort of the rest of the SEC East as well. But I mean, there's nothing better in college football season, but you always know, I remember as a kid going on vacation and getting those Lindy's magazines and all those preseason magazines and really sort of previewing both the NFL and college football during summer vacation. And by the time you got back from summer vacation, it was football season. So, only a couple months left.
Yep. Quickly, Will, I threw it in there. So we already got a comment. We did start like 3 minutes late, so wasn't too bad. So Sean Abel's wondering how the baseball game went.
We lost 6-5. My son had a rough night. A couple of Ks with the bases loaded, but he had a good time. He's 9 years old, so at the end of the day, as long as he gets ice cream at the end, he doesn't really care. But no ice cream tonight because I had to get back for Gators Breakdown, so I'll have to make it up to him tomorrow.
There we go. All right, I'll tell him I'll have to send some ice cream somehow my way since it's my fault he missed it tonight.
He'll be all right. He'll survive.
All right, there we go. So plenty to get into with these preseason magazines. A lot to discuss there. Much different from 2020 to 2021. Not totally different, but there are some different aspects from 2020 and the Gators being picked to win the SEC East, a comfortably top 5, top 10 team, to now just being outside of the top 10 in these preseason magazines. Before we move forward, remember you can find Gators Breakdown on news4jax.com/Gators Breakdown. You'll find all the Gators Breakdown content there. You can join our Chomp newsletter there as well. Also, you can watch it on YouTube like many of you are doing right now. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It really, really, really helps us out here on YouTube. Let's Gators fans find all the Gators content here from Gators Breakdown on YouTube. And if you can't check us out live, if you're on the go, check us out on your favorite podcast platform. Well, so let me, you're probably going to hear us shuffling of some pages and stuff going on. The one physical piece of media that I still buy is these preseason magazines. So we'll start with the rankings in the Athlon Magazine. Alabama, number 1, no surprise. Clemson, number 2, no surprise there. Oklahoma, no surprise. Number 3, Ohio State, 4, Georgia, 5. Well, I mean, you probably can just take the preseason polls from all of these magazines the last 3-4 years, rinse, repeat, recycle. There's your top 5 in most years there. Maybe somewhat of the first surprise. Texas A&M, number 6 there for Athlon. Iowa State, number 7. Cincinnati, number 8. Oregon, number 9. North Carolina, 10. And here it comes, your Florida Gators at number 11 in Athlon's magazine. So, Will, a couple teams in front of Florida that you probably could make a good case that Florida maybe should be in front of. Cincinnati, Oregon, North Carolina. I mean, what world are we living in right now where Iowa State and Cincinnati are ranked in front of Florida after what Florida has done the last few years? But that's the world of college football and the kind of bounce off of 2020. But in the first poll here, Will, Florida comes in at number 11 in Athlon. The top 5, no surprise. Maybe get your first surprise there with Texas A&M at number 6, and then the Gators come in at number 11.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense when you think about who they're going to have to play, right? I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to have to play Alabama. Everybody knows that's likely a game where they're an underdog. Georgia, they're going to be an underdog. LSU's probably a pick 'em. And then if they have one of those weird games they've had in 2018 or 2020 where the team decides not to show up, you're looking at a 9-4 season when you factor in the bowl game, or maybe 10-3, and that's good enough for 9th, 10th, 11th in the country, even though you're in the SEC. I think Florida is where they are because of who they have to play against. I mean, you look at the teams in front of them. There are teams they have to play that are sitting in front of them. That's one of the reasons that they're there. And I think, when you think about Cincinnati, you think about Iowa State, you think about even North Carolina, those are teams that have starting quarterbacks who are returning. And there's a lot of certainty in terms of what you get. And I think with Emory Jones, we've talked about there's a high ceiling. The question is, where's the floor, right? And is he going to be able to achieve that ceiling, or is it going to take a little while to get there? And that's really, I think, going to be the question and the determining factor for Florida's season is, when you compare him to a guy like Brock Purdy at Iowa State, Purdy is somebody who has more experience and can potentially drive that team forward. Sam Howell, I think, at North Carolina, he's somebody who can also drive that team forward. Matt Corral at Ole Miss is a guy I'm actually really thinking is going to play pretty well. And I actually agree. I think Texas A&M is going to be a really good team this year. I've never been a huge fan of Kellen Mond. And even though he was able sort of to steer the ship, I'm curious to see what happens when Jimbo has his own hand-picked quarterback in there with all the talent he's been able to amass out there in College Station. So I think it sounds about right based on what you would think in terms of where Florida is going to be an underdog. Obviously, if Florida can pull an upset in one of those games, they end up, top 5, top 7 at the end of the year, and that's sort of what you're hoping for.
Yep. Let me get here to what Athlon actually had to say about Florida. It says, when we last saw the Gators, they were giving up so many points to Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl that the Sooner Schooner had to get their tires rotated at halftime. Ouch. Perhaps the team that traded punches with Alabama in the SEC title game was just not too interested in playing in what considered a consolation contest. Then again, Florida did give up 37 points to a decidedly average LSU team in the regular season finale, so perhaps the generous defense was an accurate personality indicator. That side of the ball was. We knew we were getting that side of the ball. That defense should improve. If it doesn't, Florida might not win 5 games. A pretty big notion there from Athlon. It says, because the exodus of talent on the other side, beginning with quarterback Kyle Trask and an all-world tight end Kyle Pitts, is profound, but Dan Mullen is nothing if not an offensive genius, and he'll get to work with talented Emory Jones, a fourth-year dual-threat junior. DeMarcus Bowman is a former prep standout who bolted Clemson for the Swamp and would be counted on to anchor the run game, provided he's ruled eligible. We don't have to worry about that no longer. There is experience returning at all 3 levels of the defense, but coordinator Todd Grantham had better fix the Gators' pass defense, which gave up 28 scoring strikes last year. Linebacker Ventrell Miller is a tackling machine, and Ian Britton-Cox Jr. had 9.5 tackles for loss last year. Mullen and his staff have recruited well the past 2 years, and it's time to see if their heralded classes are ready to perform. So that was Florida, number 11 there for Athlon. Let's go to Lindy's, Will. Alabama, number 1. Oh, excuse me if you've heard that before. Clemson, number 2. See if you heard that before. Oklahoma, number 3. Georgia, 4 in this one. So they have Georgia in the top 4. Ohio State, 5. Texas A&M again at number 6. Iowa State, again, number 7. Cincinnati again, number 8. North Carolina, 9. Oregon, 10. The difference here, they have Notre Dame at number 11, and Lindy's has the Gators at 12th. So Athlon has the Gators 11th. Lindy's has the Gators 12th. And here's what Lindy's has to say. Building a new mousetrap. Gators on the run with a question mark. So the Gators have won 29 games in 3 years, and their team speed remains dangerous across the field. But how do they make up for the loss of quarterback Kyle Trask, tight end Kyle Pitts, and wide receiver Kadarius Toney, and 5 other NFL draft picks? Coach Mullen has the personnel to put more emphasis on the run and count on a new secondary and staff to shore up the back of the defense. They gave up 31 points a game last year. The good news, Will, Emory Jones has shown flashes of brilliance as a dual threat change-up for 3 years. The top 3 running backs return, and they'll be joined, and they pushed, question mark, by explosive Clemson transfer DeMarcus Bowman. The bad news, the defense was historically bad last season, as in Florida's worst since World War I. But in keeping coordinator Todd Grantham and firing 2 secondary coaches, Mullen essentially scapegoated the defensive backfield, which is even less experienced this year. Our call. The Gators are the second best team in the SEC East, but what does that mean? It means they'll have to do it a little bit differently this year. They'll have to control the ball more, which in turn might keep their defense off the field. So, well, that's a couple ways to look at it. You know, we have talked about maybe the offense taking a step back, but being a little different, being a run-focused offense, maybe being on the field a little bit longer. Defense takes a step up, and will that be enough? You know, how far is the drop on offense while be different, and how big is the jump on defense? And that, you know, you mesh those 2 things together, and you'll see what you'll get out of Florida. And look, Will, of course, you know, as soon as 2020 ended, we were going through what Florida lost in 2020, what they lost, or what they have returning for 2021. And with all that, all the love Georgia was going to get. And look, they make no bones about it. They, you know, there's no question like there was last year of heading into 2020 and beating Georgia, and could Florida do it? I mean, it's pretty cut and dry. They're both labeling Florida, and there's no question, the second best team in the SEC East. Not really giving Florida a chance here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably deserved based on the way JT Daniels played at the end of the year, based on the talent that Georgia's amassed there, and based on just the fact that Emory Jones is an unknown. Now, if you had JT Daniels coming in as a complete unknown and you had him facing off against Emory Jones as a complete unknown, then maybe you'd say, hey, it's a wash. But, you know, Daniels got some time last year, and Jones just hasn't gotten that kind of time to show us what he can do over his 3 or 4 years there at Florida. The one thing that I think is important to note is that Clemson was the preseason top 25 number 1 team last year. Florida was ranked 8th. Texas A&M was ranked 13th, so right in that range where Florida's being ranked right now. A couple things go right for the Aggies last year, and they ended up just barely missing out on the playoffs, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that they had already lost to Alabama. You know, so if Florida plays a close game to Alabama, is able to either win that one or loses close, and then runs the table the rest of the way, you can envision a season that would turn out like Texas A&M. And let's be honest, there's always teams that drop out of the top 25. Penn State, LSU was ranked 6th in the preseason polls last year, and all of us knew that was wrong. Right? We all looked at everybody they lost with Burrow and Jamar Chase and all those guys and said, how in the world are they ranked there? Oregon was 9th, Notre Dame was 10th, Auburn was 11th, Wisconsin was 12th. So, you know, at the end of the day, there's usually 4 or 5 teams that move out of the top 25 from the initial picks from these magazines. But, you know, like you said, Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama, Oklahoma, and Georgia are always going to be mainstays up there because of the way that they recruit.
Well, so I got to go to the next part here, and this may catch some Gator fans by surprise, and some good news. You know, some of that was good, some of that lauded Mullen and what he's able to do on offense, but very, very high on Mullen here as far as ranking SEC's head coaches. Well, I'll give you one guess who's number 1. Of course, Nick Saban's number 1 of Athlon's ranking the SEC coaches.
It's not Lane Kiffin?
Yeah. Number 2. Go ahead, Will. Go ahead and guess number 2. Let's make a game out of it.
I would guess they're going to give it to Orgeron, maybe?
Nope.
Huh. I would have given it to the guy. Oh, okay. That is somebody with a national title.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That would make sense.
Like, I probably, like, off the cuff, I probably wouldn't have thought of him number 2, but then once you hear it, I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes complete sense. Dan Mullen, number 3, Will Miles, as far as Athlon ranking the SEC head coaches. Hear what they have to say. It's a close call between Mullen and Kirby Smart for number 3 spot among SEC coaches. A small edge goes to Mullen after lifting Florida to its first East Division title since 2016 last season. The Gators finished 8-4 in the 20 season, gave the eventual national champion Alabama its toughest battle in a 52-46 shootout in the SEC championship game. Florida is 29-9 under Mullen and has earned a trip to New Year's Six bowls in all 3 years. Mullen is regarded as one of college football's top offensive coaches, knows how to maximize every bit of talent from the roster. Before taking over in Gainesville, Mullen went 69-46 with 8 straight trips at Mississippi State from 2009 to 2017. Kirby Smart is number 4, and here's what they say about him. Georgia's 3-year run atop the SEC East ended in 2020, but Smart's program is showing no signs of slowing down. The Bulldogs have emerged as an annual national title contender under Smart's watch, and with the amount of talent flowing through Athens, another chance on the big stage seems inevitable. Georgia finished 8-5 in Smart's first debut season in 2016, proceeded to go 36-7 with 3 East Division titles from 2017 to 2020. Even though the Bulldogs fell short of another last fall, they still finished number 7 after a Peach Bowl victory over Cincinnati. Kirby Smart is 52-14 overall and 32-9 in the SEC. Will, surprise there. Mullen's ahead of Kirby at number 3. As you said, Ed Orgeron has a national championship. You probably could have made a case for him if he just didn't fall off the face of the earth last year. Still got some big victories over Florida and LSU late in the season there, but he does have a national championship just 2 seasons ago. I think, pure coach, when you look at pure coach, you see no problem with this. I think when you factor in everything else and maybe projection, you can see where you might throw somebody in like Kirby Smart over Dan Mullen when you look at projection. But I think, based off of 2020, Dan Mullen getting that head-to-head victory over Kirby Smart, heading into 2021, nobody should have a problem with Dan Mullen at number 3 as far as SEC head coaches.
I mean, I'm okay with it. I've made the case that Dan Mullen is a better on-field coach. I think, like you said, when you take everything in totality, Kirby Smart has an SEC title. Dan Mullen doesn't yet. And so regardless of what you think, I know there's been that stuff going around with, coaches who do the most with the least amount of talent or the least with the most amount of talent. And Smart's always going to be on those lists until he wins championships because of where he's recruited. But, guys won an SEC championship. He's played for a national championship. And I think that's a lot of disrespect for Ed Orgeron. I mean, he's 45-14 in his years there at LSU. Kirby Smart 52-14. So he's won what, 7 more games, but Orgeron's got the national title. And you can sit there and go, yeah, well, he brought in Joe Burrow. Well, he weathered the Joe Burrow sort of, the year where Burrow didn't play very well. Burrow played about equivalent to Felipe Franks in 2018, still had the faith in him, and brought in Joe Brady. And I know people give Brady a lot of credit for that national championship. At the same time, you got to be humble enough to bring in that guy who's going to help you do that, right? And
that's part of coaching. Will, what is Dan Mullen's one thing that people want to harp on him about sometimes is keeping his friends on coaching staff. Sometimes you have to make the hard decision.
I was about to say, you can't keep Todd Grantham and then say if the defense doesn't succeed, it's a reflection on the head coach at that point, right? And Orgeron made changes. He decided he needed to make changes in the offense, and LSU all of a sudden took off. Now, I think that LSU team was primed to take off with a lot of the talent they had, and I obviously like Joe Burrow a lot early on and wanted Florida to go after him as a transfer. But I think you look at here's the deal. I think you list guys with national titles first, assuming they didn't just walk into one like Larry Coker. And Orgeron didn't walk into one. He helped build that team. And, I think in some respects he hasn't gotten credit for some of the guys, bringing in a guy like Burrow as a transfer and turning him into a star means you use the transfer portal about as well as you can use it, right? I mean, if Florida brought in a guy and he won the Heisman Trophy as a transfer, we would all be lauding Dan Mullen's ability to mine the transfer portal. So I think Orgeron's underrated here. I think the Smart Mullen debate is going to go on and on and on until one of them finally wins a championship. If Mullen can pull off an SEC title this year, then I think it becomes very clear that he's better than Mullen. I think there are points on either side. I think when it comes to taking on top 25 teams and not just laying an egg against teams that are equivalently talented, Dan Mullen's teams are almost always up for those games. It's the ones against the Kentuckys and the Missouris of the world that drive you crazy. Smart sort of has both. He has a record that is less than exemplary against teams that have similar levels of talent. And then every once in a while, he's got that South Carolina third string quarterback game that pops up. And you sort of wonder what's going on and why they didn't just run the ball down the opponent's throat. So I would not go to Georgia were I an offensive recruit, but I would absolutely go to Georgia if I was a defensive recruit. I think that sort of says that, we've got an offensive savant on one side, we got a defensive recruiter on the other. And that's one of the cool parts about the SEC East is we get to figure out who's going to win.
Yeah. Now I know Mullen only has one victory over, and to me, you're still judged on the SEC West, whatever Alabama, of course, does, and LSU to a point because they won the national championship. Since Mullen has been at Florida, Kirby has lost every game versus LSU and Alabama. Mullen does have the one victory over LSU in 2018, that same 2018 team that beat Georgia, I think, the very next week after they lost to Florida there. So, if Mullen does have that victory, has one victory over Georgia there. But like you said, to me, it's splitting hairs. If you put Kirby Smart above Dan Mullen, I'm not getting all up in arms about it. If you put Dan Mullen ahead of Kirby Smart, I'm not getting all up in arms about it. You can make the case for both guys to be above the other. Will, here we go. My favorite part of the whole thing in these Athlon magazines and the Lindy's magazines, scouting the Gators that you get from opposing coaches. And look, we don't know who these are. They keep them anonymous, rightfully so. So these guys can put this in the magazine every year. So we don't know where it comes from. We don't know if it comes from assistant coaches, head coaches there, but a lot of it there that you get to hear from what coaches think about Dan Mullen and staff and players here. So here's what opposing coaches have to say in Athlon's magazine. Dan Mullen continues to excel at understanding his personnel and offense and building great plays around them. They got away from the run a little bit, which we assume was a move tailored to their confidence in their quarterback and guys like Kyle Pitts. They could just as easily switch back this season based on what they have in Emory Jones and what they've lost at tight end and receiver. The speed is insane. You fear it. Their receiver speed is unbelievable. It changes how you scheme their entire offense. Defensively, they seem to be all over the place. Believe it or not, they weren't as exotic on third down as they have been in previous seasons. My guess is that personnel couldn't handle it all. Interesting there, Will.
Juniors and seniors, buddy. Juniors and seniors.
Juniors and seniors, and that the personnel couldn't handle it all. I'm going to go back and read what we had last year, where some of these opposing coaches lauded Todd Grantham and lauded the talent on Florida's roster. And now, a year later, it says, my guess is the personnel couldn't handle it all. It was surprising. So there they go. They admit it was surprising. They would struggle against lesser teams and then go out and play world beater. It's no secret in the industry that Dan is hard to work for. There you go. And Todd Grantham is stubborn. So watching that relationship maintain sure has been weird. So these are guys who are around the block. They know each other. They know each other in coaching circles. And here we go. There's no secret in the industry that Dan is hard to work for and Grantham is stubborn. So watching that relationship maintain sure has been weird. The secondary is always good. They seem to have a factory going there. Where they lacked was the front. It seemed like they didn't get nasty against the run. You could run at their inside guys and have some success. You should not be able to run against a Florida defense that easily. This is a consistent, talented offense that's transitioning and needs more effective scoring defense. If they can't improve on run defense and points allowed, you'll see a noticeable regression. So there it goes to our point there, Will. If they can't get better on defense, Florida's going to be probably a struggle in 2021. But you know what? One part we look at this roster, and we've hit it plenty of times, Will, is where the importance of getting those transfers there at defensive tackle. And when coaches noticed that Florida was easily able to run on, because look, there wasn't a lot of options there. You missed Kyrie Campbell at the beginning of the season last year, so you kind of were just rotating guys. Gervin Dexter, and we had Zach Carter playing inside when we knew he should have been playing outside, and Florida just had to get by there, and they were easily run on that time. You go back to the Texas A&M game in the second half of that game where Florida was just run up and down on in that game. So coaches, noticing Florida was easy to run on, but it's pretty interesting what some coaches had to say about the relationship with Dan Mullen and Todd Grantham.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that it should be. We know that Mullen's an interesting dude. He seems to march to the beat of his own drummer, and that's one of the reasons why he wasn't the guy who was picked to be the successor when Urban Meyer left. Obviously, Scott Strickland had a relationship with him at Mississippi State. Thought he'd be a good fit at Florida. I think he has been a good fit at Florida, right? I mean, he's won an awful lot of games. He's gotten the fan base really engaged again. There are some warts there, but there would have been warts with anybody they brought in. I mean, we could have Scott Frost right now as the head coach. So at the end of the door, Chip Kelly. So at the end of the day, you know, there are worse things than going 10-3 and playing in a major bowl game every year. At the same time, yeah, I think he's difficult. I think he can be difficult to work with. I can see how that would be true. And then, you know, Grantham doesn't seem like he's the easiest person to work with either. And I think maybe that even pushes them, right? That they're able to yell at each other and they're able to still be friends the next day. And no, you know, this is something I've thought about a lot. Is there's courage in saying I'm going to get rid of somebody and make a change, but there's also courage in saying I believe in this person and I'm going to have them stay. And people who come work for Dan Mullen from now on shouldn't question that guy's loyalty, because a guy who didn't let go of Todd Grantham after last year is going to be loyal to his assistants and is going to help his assistants move forward. So if you want to look at the positive side of those developments, that's maybe the thing that you'd look at. You know, everybody keeps saying the defense it's going to improve. Right? Yeah. It can't be worse. It's not going to be worse. But you're right. The defensive tackle is the place that they need to focus. Gravon Dexter is probably the most important player to the Florida defense and maybe even the Florida team this year. I know there are a lot of people or a lot of players on the defensive side of the ball who are expected to make all the SEC teams, and I'm sure we'll get to that in a little bit. But Gravon Dexter is the guy. He needs to be an all SEC level player for this defense to be what it can be. We'll see. He's got the pedigree to be able to do it. He showed flashes last year, but he's going to have to be consistent. But if he can really shore up the middle of that defense, I think it sort of cascades downhill. The linebackers get free. The safeties are able to play more in coverage, and all of a sudden you got a defense that's more smothering just because the defensive tackles are occupying people up front and freeing up everybody else to make plays.
Well, so I'm going back 1 year ago in the Athlon Magazine. No idea if this is the same coach, if it's I hope it's not, because if it's the same coach, this guy was completely wrong last year. Todd Grantham has a great third down package. He really mixes it up. They can kill you there with different pressure packages because of how talented they are at every position. And, well, I mean, somebody else just told us it was a personnel problem from last year when looking at this. So what we saw last year was recruiting and development is back up, so they don't have to be as exotic. They're shifting around less and can play you in their base. That's when the defense can be really dangerous. Whew, boy, whoever that was missed the boat last year. I was there with it. Like I said, I lauded that defense going into last year. But
I'm betting that was a South Carolina assistant who no longer has a job.
Probably or somebody at Tennessee or somebody. Yeah, one of those fired staffs probably. That's a good point, Will. So pretty interesting there, the stark contrast in the lauding of Todd Grantham from last year to now this year.
I got to be honest. Any coach who starts the sentence with "he's got great third down packages" when they're talking about Grantham has immediately lost the entire Gator fan base and any sort of credibility, even last year. Yeah, but exactly. After the 2020 season, he's absolutely lost whatever credibility he had. So we'll chalk that one up to a interesting interview that they were able to do that likely is with a coach who's no longer employed.
All right, Lindy's here, not as long for their approaching coach's view. Quote, I don't think Florida will be all that because they lost 3 damn good offensive players who will be good in the NFL. Kyle Pitts, Kyle Trask, Kadarius Toney. There we go. Lays it out pretty simple. Doesn't think Florida will be as good. Or will be all that. My bad. So that makes you think not thinking highly of Florida overall there. Quote, Dan Mullen is one of the brightest offensive minds in college football. What he does is simple, but he presents issues for defense. He's one of the top 2 to 3 quarterback developers in the country. He's coached against Nick Saban and Kirby Smart for a dozen years. He has a system to move the ball and beat Alabama and Georgia. Pretty interesting there from an opposing coach there. His Achilles heel is his defense. I was shocked. Here we go. From a coach in the SEC. Well, I don't know if they're from the SEC or not, but an opposing coach says, I was shocked he didn't get rid of Todd Grantham. They played poorly on defense in big games, and they have plenty of players on defense. Dan needs to pick up his recruiting and get a staff that gets big-time talent. So opposing coaches can say that, Will, and well, maybe some people will listen there. So
was that the same coach for that entire quote?
No. There's 3 bullet points there. So
Okay.
I'm assuming 3 different coaches there, because of course, the first one says I don't think Florida will be all that, and then the second coach lauded Mullen for his quarterback development and all that. So yeah, 3 separate quotes there. But pretty interesting there. The Achilles heel is his defense, and pretty much everything we've said, pick up recruiting and get a staff that can get big time talent.
Yeah, I'm not real worried about Mullen's offense. I think they're going to be able to put up about the same amount of points they did last year. It might be a little bit more volatile. Like you might score 45 one game and then you'll score 20 the next, and then you put up 63 the next game, just because you're able to get some big plays with the guys they've got in there. I'm not anticipating a huge drop off there. I think the big problem is the reason that we picked Florida last year, or the reason you picked Florida last year, I think I picked Georgia, but the reason you picked Florida last year to win the SEC East is because Georgia had to play Auburn and Alabama. And that fundamentally, I think, is the reason why most people would pick Georgia this year, is that Florida has to play Alabama and Georgia does not. And so that you're pretty much guaranteed going into the season with one SEC loss. I don't know why look, I get it. Kyle Pitts is a great player. Kadarius Toney's a great player. Kyle Trask is a great player. But it's not as though Mullen doesn't have a track record of being able to get production out of guys who aren't even really that good, right? I mean, Nick Fitzgerald was not a good passing quarterback at Mississippi State. They were still scoring 34, 35 points a game. And, I was looking back for some reason today, a decade ago, Will Muschamp and Charlie Weiss were in Gainesville calling plays and trying to figure out how to get the offense to move down the field. We ain't going back to that, right? There's no Doug Nussmeier calling plays. Dan Mullen's going to be calling plays. He's going to be able to get a lot out of his offense. Is it going to be exactly the same? No. Is it going to be as explosive? Absolutely not. Are there going to be more punts? Sure. But I also think there might be more big plays, right? They'll be able to pop some big plays that they weren't able to pop last year because of the skills that Emory Jones brings to the table. So I'm surprised that there really isn't this – the idea that the offense is going to take a step back. I just don't think Dan Mullen's history suggests that. I think, in a really bad year, they're going to score 32 points a game. And if Emory Jones comes in and plays lights out, they're going to score 40 points a game, but it's going to be somewhere between there. And at a school like Florida, that means you're winning 8 or 9 games minimum.
Yep. All right, here we go, Will. So now we'll widen the scope a little bit. We'll go kind of across the country, not really across the country, but look at Florida from a wide scope of All-American, All-SEC, and here we go. Kaiir Elam is the only All-American in both magazines. Will, he's second team in both publications here. No surprise, Kaiir Elam is an All-American. Maybe a bit of surprise after what you saw last year from Florida, and you kind of just maybe think of 1 year from another that Florida would probably have another player on an All-American team. But when you really sit and think about it, you can't argue that. I mean, Kaiir Elam's the only guy I can really think of that deserves to be on an All-American team. When you start looking at best players in the SEC, best players in the country, I mean, Kaiir Elam is pretty much the only one up there as far as proven playmakers going into the season. Now, can we see an Emory Jones, a Jacob Copeland, hopefully a DeMarcus Bowman, Lorenzo Lingard type of running back there? Can we see somebody like a Brenton Cox or a Zach Carter by the time the season ends? Absolutely. But going into this season, when you start looking at All-Americans, it's more about proven production. And Kaiir Elam is really the only guy that's on there.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? I mean, Elam was the best player in the defense last year. Isn't saying a lot, but I think he played really well as the boundary corner there. And then
let's go to your point there, and you can expound on that. And good for these publications also, I think, to maybe dive in a little bit. Is god-awful as Florida's defense was last year, to be able to still pinpoint and pick out Kaiir Elam for this, an All-American position.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think at the end of the day, Elam is the guy who had the pedigree coming in, started as a true freshman, made some big plays there coming down the stretch, the interception against Virginia that sealed that game. And then you start and then you look at what he did last year on film. He was very, very good. The problem was elsewhere, right? The problem was not with Kaiir Elam for the most part. Did he get beat every once in a while? Absolutely. But was he getting beat consistently? No, not not very often. You could do a lot and leave him basically on an island against the opposition's best player and feel pretty comfortable about that. So I look at that and say, yeah, I think that's somebody who is worthwhile putting in that place. The interesting thing is I'd have to go back and look at it, but all SEC players, at least Bill Sykes did some stuff for my site maybe 5 or 6 months ago, looking at all SEC players that are necessary for championships and things like that. And one of the things that I noted when I sort of did a follow-up on that was that most of the time the all SEC players come from people who were freshmen all SEC. And so Kaiir Elam, I believe, was a freshman all-SEC player, and so it makes sense that as he develops into his sophomore and junior year that he would develop into either an all-SEC caliber player or an all-American caliber player. The thing that has been missing at Florida recently has been those freshman all-SEC players, and that's sort of maybe what I'd be looking for this year from the Gators is not necessarily does Zach Carter become an All-American? I'd be looking for does Jason Marshall make the freshman All-SEC team or All-American team? And that's going to tell you a lot about not just Florida this year, but about what the potential for Florida in 2023 and beyond is going to be.
Oh, yeah, I like that aspect there. And yeah, hopefully we do see some freshmen there toward the end of the year. So, all right, Will, let's zoom in a little bit and let's go to all SEC. And for Athlon, they go 4 team deep here. 6 all SEC players in Athlon. Will, that's compared to 11 the year before for Florida. So 5 less players on all SEC from 2020 to 2021 for Florida. So Florida has 6 total, Will. Bama has 4 first-teamers. 15 total all SEC players for Alabama. Georgia has 3 first-teamers, 14 total. For Florida, the first, second, and third teamers are all on defense. Zach Carter, Kaiir Elam make the first team. Ventrell Miller makes second team. Brenton Cox makes third team. All on defense, while Emory and Jacob Copeland are the only offensive players on Athlon's all SEC team, and they are both 4th team in Athlon. So, Will, a couple things here. The drop from 2020 to 2021 in total players. Of course, right now, Alabama, Georgia's being picked. You could probably predict that they're going to be, Florida's going to have less players on them. But also, Will, the balance of defense and offense. And we hinted at this toward the end of last year. And I remember sometime in the spring saying, if you were to list Florida's best players for as bad as the defense was last season, you're probably going to start with 4 or 5 defensive players out of the top 5 for Florida. When you look at just start listing players who have proven production going into 2021. So as good as the offense was and as bad as the defense was last season, when you start listing Florida's best players, they're going to be on defense. And that's kind of what this all SEC team shows for Athlon is, Florida's best players are on defense. And when you look at Zach Carter, Kaiir Elam, Ventrell Miller, Brenton Cox, they're getting a whole lot of love going into 2021.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but those 11 guys who were listed last year, I'm guessing Marco Wilson was on that list. I'm guessing Sean Davis might have been on that list. I'm guessing Diabate might have been on that list.
Finally, go ahead. Yep.
Did they have Kyrie Campbell on that list? So you start looking at some of the guys who struggled last year, wonder whether they were on that list. And then the other thing is that it makes sense that the defense would be the thing where we'd say, hey, that's where Florida's best players are. There's nobody left on the offense who was a major contributor last year, right? I mean, your quarterback is out. We expect that the running backs are going to be replaced, or at least a lot of their production is going to be replaced by guys that we think are probably better. Your tight end is gone.
Here's the big detriment. Athlon's first team quarterback last year won. Georgia quarterback Jamie Newman.
It wasn't Stetson Bennett.
Kyle Trask was second team, so we saw how wrong they were on that one last year.
Well, somehow Mac Jones still snaked him out for that one. But no, I mean, so the point is that guys like Trent Whittemore, guys like Justin Shorter, guys like Keon Zipper, guys like Xavier Henderson probably are more talented as an aggregate than the guys you're talking about on the defensive side of the ball. It's just that the guys on the defensive side of the ball we've at least seen can be reliable in stretches, and we want to see that consistently, right? So I think that's one of the things about the defense last year is there were a few games where they looked absolutely clueless, but for the most part, it was a couple of guys every time not doing what they were supposed to do, being out of position or just getting beat. It wasn't like everybody on defense getting beat on every play. Now, obviously, the defense itself as a whole wasn't very good, but part of that is trust. I mean, I remember in 2017 diagramming some plays in the secondary where Florida's defense was just getting gashed, and it really came down to the corners and the safeties didn't trust each other. And it felt like we saw that a little bit last year, and I think spring camp and fall camp is going to hopefully help rectify that. There was also going to be younger guys to compete, which is something that I don't know that Florida was comfortable doing last year. So I sort of look at it and say it's if Trevon Grimes had decided to come back, right, we would look at that and say, oh, yeah, he's going to be the breakout guy. But I don't know, based on his history, would he have wound up with 40 catches for 600 yards, just like he had the last couple of years? And then would that have stifled somebody like Copeland from stepping up, or somebody like Henderson from stepping up, or somebody like Whittemore from stepping up? Maybe so. That's the reality, right, is that there's a lot of turnover on offense. So there's nobody that anybody's going to look for at a preseason magazine and say that guy's going to be all SEC. But the reality is, I think if you look back at Mullen's offenses, I bet that's where more of his all SEC players came from than the defenses, even at Mississippi State. And I think that'll probably be the case this year. So if Florida gets the hits on the all SEC for the defense, I think that may bode well for the Gators, because you figure they're going to get 2, 3, 4 guys from Mullen's offense. Just, if I'm saying they're going to score 35 points a game, they're going to have a couple of guys who make that team and do it at much higher than the fourth team.
Will, I hate to cherry pick, but can we just get that defense that played in the third quarter versus Alabama in the third quarter of the SEC championship? If we can get that defense, we can get anything close to that defense. I mean, sign me up for that right now. That was they put up a performance to get Florida back in that game and just a little bit, keep them there. But if we could get that defense, and I say that because, of course, it was versus the best team in the country, and second, it was toward the end of the season, and you had some players that are going to be on this defense making plays. Mamou Diabate, Zach Carter. You had a lot of guys who were going to be on this year's defense. If we I want to go back, watch that game a little bit. Then if we can just get that defense, then maybe you can, that's something you can build on for going back and looking at that game.
Yeah, watch the second half. Don't watch the last 10 minutes of the second quarter. That's for sure.
No,
I think that the defense, the defense is going to be better. The talent there, that was why I asked you whether those quotes were together when you list them, because one statement says they have too much talent to be as bad on defense, and the next statement says they need to recruit better, and both of those things can't be true. It's one problem or the other. I think at the end of the day, though, it's a Todd Grantham problem. He's got to figure it out. And then I've said this pretty consistently during the offseason. I don't know that people have paid a lot of attention to me when I've said it, but I think 2021 is a rebuilding year, right? I mean, you took your shot last year. One of the things we sort of talked about with recruiting in the 9th, 10th, 11th spot is that you're going to have to cluster these guys together, and you're not going to be a consistent you're going to be a consistent competitor in the SEC East, but you're not going to be a consistent winner in the SEC East or the SEC at 10th. It's just not possible to do it, right? There's a talent differential. And so you're going to get an opportunity every once in a while. So LSU a couple of years ago was able to take advantage of that. Auburn every once in a while was able to take advantage of that. Georgia hasn't really been able to take advantage of it yet, even though they're there consistently year after year after year. Mullen was able to take advantage of it to win the East. He wasn't able to take advantage of it to win the SEC or get into the playoff. That's sort of the next step. I don't know that that's a reasonable expectation for 2021. And so I'm not surprised to see that the number of all SEC players is relatively low. The other thing is, with all the quarterback changeover that's happening at Alabama, you figure that a lot of the guys surrounding the quarterback are going to get credit this year, whereas last year a lot of that credit went to the wide receivers and the quarterback. That's not going to be the case this year. So if Alabama's defense is lights out, or if the running game's really good, then you get 3 offensive linemen on the first team and a couple of defensive linemen, and all of a sudden you're halfway to the 14 or whatever that number was that you cited earlier that Alabama's got on like the top 3 teams.
Yep. All right, we'll zoom through here. Lindy's they're all SEC only goes 3 teams deep, while Athlon goes 4 teams deep. So on Lindy's, Florida has 4 all SEC players compared to 9 the year before in the 3 teams. 3 of the 4 on defense again, with Stuart Reese, Will, being the only offensive player that Lindy's list as a center on the 3rd team there. So kind of surprising there. He did play there in the spring a little bit. Didn't light the world on fire like we thought. Now we do maybe some projection here of going back to this run style offense for Dan Mullen and John Hevesy, that you see a player like Stuart Reese, who played in that style of offense at Mississippi State, is an offensive lineman that can be counted on when Florida moves forward. But it's Kyer Elam on the first team All SEC, and then Ventrell Miller, Brenton Cox on Lindy's All SEC second team. Surprised they didn't have Zach Carter on the 3rd team there. So probably the biggest surprise, along with Stuart Reese being listed on the offense there on Lindy. So, all right, well, let's scope it back out to the national unit rankings. Lindy's doesn't have a single position grouping for Florida in top 10 in the country. So when they start listing quarterbacks, running backs, wide receiver groupings, offensive line groupings on offense, of course, defensive line, linebackers, secondary, Lindy's doesn't have a single position grouping that Florida ranks in top 10 in the country. Athlon only has Florida 1, and they give, even with all the talent lost, Will, Athlon ranks the Gators wide receiver unit 7th best in the country. So you lose Kyle Pitts, you lose Kadarius Toney, you lose Trevon Grimes, Jacob Copeland, Justin Shorter, Xavier Henderson, Trent Whittemore, Keon Zipper, all return, and that's good for Athlon to put Florida at 7th in the country.
Yeah, I'm not sure I get that one. I think if I was going to pick the units that I think are going to be good, I'd say running backs is one that I think might be a really good unit for Florida. I think linebacker has an opportunity to be really good, especially if, like I said, if Dexter can step up in the defensive line. If those transfers can hold their own up front, then that frees up the linebackers to do an awful lot of stuff. And then I think corner, right? I mean, the idea that you've got a guy like Jason Marshall coming in with Kyer Elam on the other side, I think makes a difference. And that's not necessarily.
I have a surprise for you there on this next topic.
Well, and then I was going to say they've got Jadarius Perkins coming as a transfer as well, right? And he's really gotten sort of the laudits in terms of being that big corner who can potentially then push Marshall into the inside if they need to do that. So I think those are sort of the spaces I'm looking at. Is running back, linebacker, and defensive back, at least at corner, are the places where Florida can probably has an opportunity to be elite. A lot of stuff has to go right for those positions to be elite, but you figure 1 out of 3 is probably going to hit at least.
Yeah. So they gave no reasoning. They just had a listing. Florida was Athlon was the wide receivers was the only one that was listed as a national unit ranking here. So let's go to SEC unit rankings, Will. That's where we can really hone in on Florida. So here we go. Florida, 4th best quarterback room in the SEC. That is behind, let's see if I can put this together. Ole Miss, number 1, Matt Corral, no surprise there. Alabama, number 2, no surprise there. Georgia, number 3, giving JT Daniels love there. Florida, number 4, behind that. So, of course, they I think, put the emphasis on the starting quarterback there. I think you look at Florida's quarterback room, you take a look at the aggregate and the depth there, you probably could push Florida up a little more there. But I think they weigh that with starters, and rightfully so much. So Florida, 4th best quarterback room in the SEC. They give the running back room 5th. Will, wide receivers / tight ends, the 3rd best wide receiver unit in the SEC. Here it is what Athlon says. 8th best offensive line unit there for the Gators. 5th defensive line, linebacker, 3rd best linebacker core. Will, going to your point there for Florida. And here's the surprise, Will. Never in my wildest dreams, after last year, you can absolutely see why. Never did I think Florida would have the 6th ranked defensive backfield. When you look at this, the DBU moniker and all the guys who have played for Florida in the defensive backfield the last 20 years, 30 years, Florida, 6th best DB unit in the SEC. Now, this is what I don't get, Will. They have LSU number 2. LSU's defense and secondary was just as bad as Florida's last year, but for whatever reason, Derek Stingley gets a whole lot of love. Kyer Elam's usually right behind him. I mean, if you're going to grade Florida so harshly on what they did on defense last year in the secondary, shouldn't you probably grade LSU in the same scope?
I mean, you would think so, but again, I think Stingley has a reputation that helps with that sort of stuff when you've got people who are looking at it, and I think there's a lot of projection that has to go on, right? I mean, Elam played pretty well last year. We already talked about that, and the secondary still got torched. So obviously, it takes more than Elam playing well, and so guys like Marshall, who I've already mentioned, but guys like Donovan McMillan, who have been getting a lot of pub over the offseason, and then you've got Jarius Perkins, I mentioned earlier, coming in. Those guys are going to have to meld with the guys that they've got at safety, and there's just not a lot of proven stuff back there. So last year, I think people thought that Florida's secondary was going to be consistent but not elite because they had a lot of experience. Now you got a lot of guys who are I think the talent in the room has gone up considerably, but now you don't have the experience. And so I go back to what I said about 2021 being a rebuilding year, that early on especially, there may be some growing pains as those guys learn. I mean, if you think back to, I think it was 2007, where Joe Hayden was a true freshman, and Hayden was a heck of a player. But at the end of the day, that 2007 team, God, that Michigan bowl game, Tebow's won the Heisman, and Florida couldn't stop Michigan in that bowl game to save their life. And so that's one of those things where you can envision something like that happening. But the other thing I think that maybe we need to take into consideration is if I were Todd Grantham, I would have the Texas A&M and the Alabama games on in the weight room just on a loop. And I would want those guys to be so upset and embarrassed.
Maybe their media doesn't see it and get out their pennies on it a bunch.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you just look at it and you say, these guys have pride, and I can't imagine that their pride hasn't been hurt. And in some respects, that to me is probably the driver in the improvement more than anything. You think they're not going to be paying attention when fall camp starts? You think they're not going to be paying attention to Savage when he's trying to kill him during the offseason? You think they weren't paying attention to the spring? For all of the talk about Mullen not caring about the Cotton Bowl, and I think that's all true. At the same time, I think in some respects that sends a message too, that, you leave the offseason, you guys aren't as good as you think you were. And there's real areas to improve. You should be embarrassed by these performances, and we're going to make sure we drill that in. So I think in some cases it's not even a talent. It's not even a talent issue or necessarily an execution issue. It's an attitude issue, and we didn't see a whole lot of attitude last year. And so I think the secondary is going to have a very different attitude, and even if they're getting beat, I think they'll be better just because of that.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I brought that up too. I think that started back in spring and all that, getting your head right and getting some confidence back. I think they lost their confidence early in the season, and I don't think they ever got it back. And I think hopefully coaching changes there help along the way and getting some kind of mindset there that you have to play, that you have to be able to play that way in the Florida secondary. Will, this is ridiculous. So I didn't even notice this until I just looked at it. Alabama doesn't have an SEC unit ranking lower than second. It's ridiculous. Quarterback 2, running back 1, wide receiver 1, offensive line 1, defensive line 2, linebacker 1, DB 1. I mean, I'd have to go back and look at last year. I don't think they were getting that much love last year.
I mean, they've won like 6 of the last 12 championships or something like that.
I shouldn't be surprised, but that's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, and I mean, the rich keep getting richer. It's not as though Saban's slowing down over there. They just signed like a lifetime contract. So, we're gonna. He's gonna have to like slip on an ice patch or something for us to be able to get rid of him. And he's built a behemoth there. And the reality is that this Alabama dynasty is more impressive than probably just about any program that's been built in college football. Maybe if you go back to like some of those Oklahoma teams, some of those Miami teams in the early 2000s, I think were good enough to be able to compete with a team like this, but they didn't have the sustained success. But again, I think one of the things that has been proven year after year after year is that there are times to get Saban. Those times to get him are early in the year, and those times to get him are when he's making changes in quarterbacks. Now, that hasn't been true the last few years. Obviously, nobody got him last year with Mac Jones. Tua came in and played immediately. But before that, the offense was something where you had an opportunity to get Jake Coker. You had the opportunity to get was it Blake Sims, I think, was the quarterback. So there have been opportunities to get him when he's changed quarterbacks because he has not always necessarily picked the guy who was a world beater. we'll see what happens with the guy they got now. I mean, he's a highly ranked recruit, and obviously Lindy's has him pretty high there. But I think it's dangerous to say somebody's going to be the best quarterback in the country when you've seen him throw like 6 passes.
Last year, Will, Alabama third quarterback, running back 1, wide receiver 1, offensive line 1, defensive line 2, linebacker 3, DB 4. So there we go. It was a little worse last year for a national championship team. So compared to this year. All right, last one, Will, we'll go to Lindy's and how they rate in the SEC, the unit rankings here. And they have Florida quarterback room 6th best behind Auburn. Behind Auburn. And Auburn, Lindy's has above.
Well, they brought in TJ Finley as a backup, right? So
that's true, but I'm not sure they put that in here. But good point. But I still don't think that he's included. But Brian Harsin and Bo Nix above Emory Jones and Dan Mullen. Sorry, I can't wrap my head around that one.
No, whoever wrote that one needs to be fired too, because I'm not sure Bo Nix could hit water if he fell out of a boat. Like, he is just his accuracy has not been good since high school. It wasn't good his freshman year in college. It wasn't good last year. I don't know why we expect he's going to be anything other than Jake Locker. Right. Jake Locker was that guy at Washington that everybody thought was going to develop. And when you looked at his underlying statistics, he said he's just not accurate. And he wasn't accurate at Washington. He wasn't accurate in high school. And he wasn't accurate in the NFL, but he had a cannon. And so everybody was like, oh, this is a great quarterback. And I've been on this train for a while where I've looked at, especially in terms of transitions from high school to college, that accuracy says something about your ability to read a defense. Because if you're constantly trying to fit the ball into tight spots in college, that means you're throwing to the wrong guy. And we've seen that a few times. I mean, even a couple of years ago in the Auburn game that Florida won, I think Auburn should have won that game. There was a play where Nix had a guy wide open running down the field, and he completed the pass, but he threw it in a way where the guy like somersaulted as he caught it and wasn't able to go into the end zone. And then they turned the ball over like 2 or 3 plays later, and all of a sudden Florida sort of averts a disaster. Those sorts of things. Anybody who puts Auburn's quarterback room in front of Florida's at this point, especially when you factor in the aggregate, because we haven't seen a lot of Anthony Richardson, but the potential there is significant, and especially when you consider what Mullen's been able to do with quarterbacks. The thing I think that people are sort of missing is the Brian Johnson factor. It's interesting. I hadn't thought about this until earlier this week, but I was looking at it. Johnson was there. He came into Mississippi State as the quarterback coach in 2014 when Dak Prescott made that leap, and he left right before Nick Fitzgerald took over and really wasn't very good through the air. And then he comes in 2018 at Florida as the quarterback coach, and Felipe Franks really makes a leap from being really bad in 2017 to being average to even really being above average by the end of the year. And then you look at what Kyle Trask was able to do developing under Brian Johnson. That's actually sort of the hidden thing that I think we should think about when we think about the quarterback room. Is Dan Mullen's had a lot of success with a lot of different quarterbacks, but the 2 most successful quarterbacks he's had, Brian Johnson's been the quarterback coach or the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, and I know that quarterback room, especially Emory Jones, loved Brian Johnson. And a really good relationship there with the quarterback coach and the quarterbacks there. So, I don't think, pure coaching wise, I think, Dan Mullen's got that too. But I do think relationships can have a lot to do with that too. And we'll see how that transfers as well. Quarterback room from Lindy's, Georgia 1, Ole Miss 2. I actually they got LSU 3rd. And deep quarterback room, quarterbacks that played a lot last year with Miles Brennan, Max Johnson. 2 good quarterbacks there for LSU. So no problem with them being number 3 and above Alabama in my eyes there. So running backs, here we go. Florida number 9 there. We talk about, Florida's depth going 5 deep. Lindy's not a big fan of this Florida offense, or not as big a fan for this Florida offense, but Marcus Bowman, Lorenzo Lingard, and you had the 3 guys from last year as well returning. I'd probably depth-wise, I'd probably have Florida a little bit higher than 9th too. And that's a little bit of projection. We do have to see these 5 stars live up to their potential, and we do need some more explosive plays out of the running backs that are returning. Receivers, they have Florida's number 6 in the SEC, when Athlon had Florida's 7 in the nation there. So, like I said, Lindy's not as high on the Florida offense, and they have the Florida offensive line number 9 in the country. Move to defense. Lindy's has Florida's defensive line 7th best in the SEC. Florida's linebackers 5th best in the conference. And the secondary, they have Florida 4th best. So they like the Florida secondary more than Athlon does. Those Lindy's got the 4th best behind LSU, Alabama, and Texas A&M there. So, will anything catch your eye there?
Just that it really kind of goes in order of recruiting, right? That when you think about these things that are and the rankings, I mean, yeah, they vary a little bit, but if you took the aggregate, if you took the average of all of these different teams that they list these different position groupings,
I was going to do that and ran out of time, but
I mean, it sort of goes back and points to Florida's been 4th or 5th in the SEC overall in recruiting for the past decade, really at this point. And that's kind of where everybody ranks in preseason. Now you could say that those rankings are biased and that Dan Mullen is going to be able to develop these guys better than other people. And maybe you're right. And so they end up being 2nd or 3rd. The question is going to be, week 3, we get to find out, right? They're going to be playing the team that's ranked 1st or 2nd in every category. And we'll find out real quick what we got.
Yep. There. So preseason magazine's out. Everybody go to your newsstands. I enjoy them. Like I said, it's the only physical reading material that I buy every year. Everything else I digitally read on my books and magazines and stuff pretty much digitally. But those are still the most physical media that I will buy. I'll be enjoying them on the flight next week, Will, for vacation. So Braden Gall will be our guest next week on Gators Breakdown. He works for Athlon Sports, so we'll dive even more into these preseason magazines, get his thoughts from the Athlon side. From Braden Gall will join us. So even more preseason talk, preseason magazine talk next week, Will.
Oh, that's awesome. This is such a fun time of year. And these magazines are great, right? They give us some fodder to talk about. Obviously, have a great time while you're out there with your wife, sipping the pina coladas on the beach there, buddy. And we'll hold down the fort till you get back.
Yep. I'll release that episode next Monday. I leave next Tuesday. So before I leave, that episode will be up and ready to go. I won't let you guys miss a week, even though I'll be on vacation.
Hey, it takes a commitment to be Gator Dave. So I'm sure everybody will appreciate having it next week. But yeah, man, it's going to be interesting to hear an outsider's perspective who really sort of looks at the SEC and the country as a whole and see what he thinks about Florida. Obviously, you and I are real close to the program in terms of how closely we follow it. And I do think that sometimes that colors the opinions in good ways and bad ways. So it's good to get the outside opinion and somebody who's really taking a more holistic look at the entire country and the entire conference.
Yep. So that's next week there, and we'll have some more fodder between these preseason magazines as well. Plenty of content to go in there to kind of last us through the summer as well to get some of those extra episodes in and further the conversation here on Gators Breakdown. So, Will, I know you and I both kind of been out there on this college football playoff expansion stuff. So your latest article at League Reaction details that, and the talk for your shows on YouTube and stuff like that. But that change is going to happen. We can get into that another time when we have more time. But anything else coming up at Reading Reaction on the written side?
I mean, there's going to be some stuff. So Nick's finishing up his Charlie Pell series. That's going to be coming up. I do encourage people to go take a look at the article. I am obviously, and you are obviously not in favor of the 12-team playoff. But if they're going to do the 12-team playoff, I want them to do some things that increase parity. Because otherwise, all we're doing is sending Coastal Carolina out to get slaughtered by Alabama and Clemson. And so instead of doing it that way, is there a way to make that tournament more fun if that's the way we're actually going to go? So that was sort of the idea of the article, was to say, hey, we know this is coming. I don't like it, but at the end of the day, it's coming. How do we make it more fun? How do we make it work for 12 teams in a way where it's an entertaining tournament, but it also helps the regular season be a little bit better as well? Because that's my big concern, is that the game against Alabama week 3 is a critical game for Florida this year. I don't know that 3 years from now that's going to be the case, and so I think there are some things college football can do, or hopefully can do, to make things a little bit better.
Yeah, I got my thoughts out there about the expanded playoff. Like you said, well, it's coming. So I tried to look at the good in it and explain what I do like about it. There's not much, but what I do like about an expanded 12-team college football playoff.
I do have to say, I'm excited about doing a live Gators breakdown the Friday before a playoff game in the Swamp.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And I'm crazy. So I will watch, some random Division II football game in the middle of the desert when there's nothing else going on. You give me a college football playoff, obviously I'm going to eat that up. My concern is what it does to the casual fan, and my concern is what it does to the thing that makes college football special, right? Over the last 30 years, this sport has grown by leaps and bounds by feeding the blue bloods and sort of allowing those programs to succeed. And, nobody in the state of Florida is really a UCF fan or a USF fan. I mean, there are people who claim to be, but the Gators or the Seminoles or the Hurricanes are their first team that they follow, and then they went to USF or UCF and start following them. It's the same thing in different states, right? I mean, I'm up here in Philadelphia, and there are people who went to Penn and Drexel and Temple, and they're all Penn State fans because they grew up in Penn State, was the behemoth in that area. Same thing I'm sure happens in Ohio. So that's the thing you lose when you start opening this up, is that if a team like UCF can make that tournament, then you lose sort of the centrality of all of the different fan base, of all the different people who didn't necessarily go to Florida but are huge Gator fans, who didn't go to Florida State but are huge Seminoles fans. That's one of the things that makes the Sunshine State rivalry so fun, is everybody has picked one of the three, and those teams play each other often enough that somebody gets bragging rights, and bragging rights are going to have to be enough, because at the end of the day, they're all going to make the tournament.
That's right. All right, there we go. You can find Will Miles at readingreaction.com and on Twitter at Will Miles SEC. I'm the host of Gators Breakdown, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thanks for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown.